February the 23rd. It is raining out, and I've just heard on the news where Charterways are going to pull the buses off the street by 6 o'clock due to the icy conditions of the road. Now, Mother and I have been talking over what we should talk about, and we've decided for a little bit of history. I did try to record some Down East music last night from Don Messer's program, but it wasn't successful. So here we are. We're going to talk a little bit about Mother's history. Mother, where were your mother and your father born?
My mother was born at West Legensley, and my father was born at West Marbree.
Well then, was it your grandparents or your great-grandparents that came out from Scotland?
My grandparents.
Now, do you know what part of the country they came from? Like, where did your grandmother come from, and then where did your grandfather come from?
Southeast in Scotland.
Did they both come from Southeast?
Well, as far as I know.
I thought you told me at one time that one of them came from Morar or something like that.
My father came from Morar. My father's people came from Morar.
Oh, I see. Okay. Now, and what did your grandfather work at, or do you know that?
No, I have no idea.
How about your father?
My father was a carpenter. He helped to build a church at Legensley, and then he went to Boston and he worked as a carpenter there.
I see. And now, was Uncle Jack born in Cape Breton, or was he born, I think your dad went to Beverly, Massachusetts?
Yes. My brother Jack was born at Legensley, and then my father and mother moved to Beverly, Massachusetts, and I was born there. And my mother died when I was 5 years old, and my brother and I went back down to Nova Scotia with my uncle and aunt, Malcolm and Katie Walker.
You know, it's something that I just learned a couple of years ago, and I never realized it before, was that your uncle and aunt were brother and sister. I always thought they were a husband and wife. So I guess we come from a line of single folks. Not much wonder Grace and I are left in the tree. Okay, now, well then, did Uncle Jack work the farm for a while? Was your uncle able to work it for a while, and then what happened to him? Was he sick for some time before he died?
Yes, he worked on the farm after we went down for a while, but then he took sick and he couldn't work anymore, and my brother, he worked on the farm, and then he used to go down to Sydney and to Marble Mountain to work.
What, you mean in the mine?
Yes, in the coal mine in Sydney and the marble quarry in Marble Mountain.
Okay, now, when did you come up to North Cobalt?
We came up in 1907. My aunt and I came up to North Cobalt in 1907. And my aunt died in 1915. We sent her remains back down to Nova Scotia. And we moved to Kirkland Lake in 1929. And we moved down to North Bay in 1966.
Well, how come you and your aunt went up to North Cobalt now? Did Uncle Jack go up there just the year before to work, or?
Yes, Uncle Jack was, my brother Jack, he was working in the mines in Cobalt for a year, over a year, and he sent out for my aunt and I to come up, and he had a house built in North Cobalt, and I lived there for 22 years.
Yeah, okay, well, I suppose you, now, your aunt died in 1915. Now, was it after she died that you went up to Kirkland Lake to work, and how did it come about that you did go to Kirkland Lake to work?
Well, I went up to Kirkland Lake in 1915, in December 1915, after my aunt died, and I worked for T.W. Foster in the store and in the house.
But how did you happen to hear of that job?
A friend of mine in Haleberry told me about it, and I wrote to them, so I went out.
How long did you work at Foster's in Kirkland Lake, and what happened after that?
I worked for 2 years at Foster's, and Mr. and Mrs. Foster and the family moved to Toronto in 1917, and I came back down to North Cobalt, and I got married, and the fire came in 1922 and we were burnt out. But they built again, and we stayed there till 1929.
Well, now, I think we should talk just a little bit about the fire. I've been reading that book by Maud Groom on North Cobalt, and I'm pretty well up to that part right now, reading about it. I think just for the sake of recording, you could probably tell us maybe the events, say a day or two before the fire, and what was happening, and the date of the fire. And if you could just tell, a day or two ahead of what was happening ahead of time, or if anything, that led up to the fire.
And a couple of days before the fire.
Carry on.
A couple of days before the fire.
You don't have to be so close.
There was the smoke was across the track. I guess it started from cinders from the train. That's what they say anyway. And then when it came towards evening on the 4th of October, we had to go down on a freight train from North Cobalt to Cobalt with the 2 children. They were sick at the time. So then we went back. We built again, and we went back, and we stayed there till 1929. There are presses. And we had started. There was a man came after us with a truck to take us up to the train. And we were so excited that I just took a bottle of Scots emulsion and 2 other little things. We didn't have time, for our children were sick, and we didn't have time to pick up anything else. And we went to the station at Cobalt, and man told us to go up to the Masonic Hall. So we went up there and sat down for a while, and the children was crying, and then another man came and he says the hospital is the best place for them. So we went up to the hospital, and they slept for a while.
Call us by name.
Margaret and Mary, they slept for a while. And then my husband, he went out.
Call him by name.
My husband, Dan MacDougall, went out, and he heard that the place was burned down. So we went with a friend of ours in Cobalt and stayed there for a month. And then we moved back to North Cobalt again and rented a house for a month.
From whom?
From Alex. And then we went to stay with a friend of mine, Mrs. Tom Dunn, till our house was built again, and we went back in our house in December. And that's all.
After the fire, then, did Daddy go up to Kirkland Lake to work, or did he work for a while still in North Cobalt. And just name some of the mines that he worked at in Kirkland, in North Cobalt. And yeah, I think he worked at one of the mines there when that young lad was killed. He used to tell us a story about that.
And when we were back in the house, my husband went to work in the contact mine, and there was 3 fellows killed while he was working there. So he went back up to Kirkland later on.
When did he go up to?
I think it's in summer.
Oh, what year?
Summer of 1915.
No, you're getting mixed up because the fire was in 1922. He must have gone up to Kirkland Lake. And did he go up to Kirkland Lake as early as 1923, do you think? Did he work up there for 6 years before we went up? He did, eh? And what did he used to do? Come down every weekend or two, or I suppose in the long changes?
He worked at the Cambro.
Oh, he worked at the Cambro. Yeah, where was the Cambro mine? Oh, yes, it was out towards Larder Lake. Yes, that's true. Now, did Uncle Jack work up in Kirkland Lake in those years too? You see, if you lean towards me, then you could just answer my questions, just normally without, yeah. Okay, well then, we went up to Kirkland Lake in 1929, and life was pretty uneventful up there, I guess, until Dad took sick in 1939, I believe, eh? Yes, and then he had to go to the hospital, and then, of course, along came the war, started the Second World War, and then I guess I went in training in 1940. And so then life went on, and I guess we all know what happened up until 1965, and then our big plans were made to come down to North Bay. Unfortunately, the night before we were leaving for North Bay, Mother fell and broke her leg. I guess it was around the 1st of September, as I recall. And she was in the hospital there until January of 1966. Now, I guess we've had a pretty uneventful life. So I really don't know what else to talk about to you.